Hello, everyone. Hello, GLASE members. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining the GLASE Industry Talk. This month, we prepare a CEA market trends analysis. So it's an analysis of the 2017 USDA Census of Agriculture. This topic has been recommended by you, the industry members. And for those of you that are not familiar with the USDA Census of Ag, this is the third version. So the USDA has published the Census of Agriculture in 2007, 2012, and 2017. And they look for all kinds of numbers and statistics with the US agriculture market. A small portion of that, it's an analysis and a survey that they do with CEA systems. Some of the crops you're going to be looking here are exclusive CEA. Some others are open field as well, which makes hard to make an analysis. And for this reason, we're not going to dive deep into those. But I hope you enjoy the talk today. As a reminder, the industry talk, it's an activity for GLASE members only. So it's much more conversation instead of a webinar or a talk coming from one side. So please feel free to unmute and ask questions at any time. We can go the entire presentation and have a Q&A or discussion afterwards. Or if you prefer, please stop me at any time. Questions, comments, we're going to see a lot of numbers, a lot of graphics. So I actually suggest you, if you have questions, to stop along the way so we don't accumulate a lot of questions later on and make hard. We can just get this discussion fresh to go. So with that said, let's start with the slides. The section from the Census of Ag that we're going to be looking today refers to the food crops grown under GLASE and other protection. So that's how the USDA defines this category that is exclusive under GLASE or other protection, and it's just for food crops. For example, floriculture and bedding crops and propagative materials are also reported on the Census of Ag, but because they also include open crop production, the open field production, I have not made any analysis there. There's a reference table at the end, but I have not made assumptions as far as CEA systems for those crops. So you're going to be looking for the food crops today. Also, according to the USDA definitions, when you look numbers that refer to total greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs, this category includes greenhouse tomatoes and other greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs. So you're going to see some total numbers reported, but then within this category, they break down into tomatoes and other greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs. Tomatoes are tomatoes. The other greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs would be everything else other than tomatoes. That's how the USDA is defining those terms here. The other category we're going to take a quick look are greenhouse fruits and berries. So here the data includes the strawberries, raspberries, growing greenhouses and high tunnels where the crops were always covered. One quick point to say here as well, they do not make any differentiation between a high tunnel or a high automated greenhouse. They're going to be looking all these as a one thing together, and that's why the discussion is good. We can get your feedback based on your knowledge on the market. If you have comments, if you think those numbers might be skewed one way or another based on these definitions from the USDA, it's a great opportunity for us to talk about this and try to come up with good numbers and hopefully can help you to make future decisions as far as market, production, and how to position your companies on the market. So first table we're going to be taking a look here. This is the 2017, comes from the 2017 USDA Census of Ag, which is the latest one. And on this table here, we are looking for food crops grown under GLASE and other protection, the category we just saw, broken down into 4 categories. Even though we see 4 categories here, the first one, total greenhouse and vegetables and fresh cut herbs, is really all those together, the greenhouse tomatoes and other greenhouse vegetables, and then we have another one here, the greenhouse fruits and berries. Some of the analysis we can look here as far as market trends. Looking for the total greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs production, the market value, so the market growth from 2012 to 2017 was a growth reported of 17.9%. So we have almost 20%, 17.9 market growth in terms of value of sales. So the value of sales jumped from 634 million in 2012 to 748 million in 2017. Other parameters we can look at is the number of farms. So there was an increase in the number of farms from 8,750 to 10,849, market growth of 24%. But then the square footage also grew from 97,000, almost 100,000 to 112,000. But it's interesting to see that it does not follow exactly the number of farms. So there was a higher increase in the number of farms compared to the square footage. And that's interesting to see, because if we're seeing more farms, maybe there are more smaller farms versus you having big acquisitions where you merge them and you have these numbers are not one-to-one. So it's just interesting to look at that. Keep that in mind as you look through the numbers as well. Looking into the two different markets within the total greenhouse. So I have tomatoes and other greenhouse vegetables. Right out of the bat, one interesting thing to see here is that the growth of greenhouse tomatoes was much smaller than the other greenhouse vegetables. So the value market growth for tomatoes of 4.7% versus 40.6% on other greenhouse vegetables. The GLASE team, we had a few discussions beforehand before coming to this presentation, and we believe this is a reflection of the market, of a tomato market being more mature, more stable, versus a fast-growing opportunity for other greenhouse vegetables. And everything included here, right, would be the other greenhouse vegetables, including leafy greens, fresh herbs, and high-value crops. So we can see there is a big spike here compared to the tomato growth. Now, looking for the greenhouse fruits and berries, I was surprised with that. There was a decrease in market value. So the market value went down 13.5%, even though the square footage increased almost 50%, so 47.3% increase into the square footage for greenhouse fruits and berries, and also the number of farms increased. So we see more companies jumping in, higher square footage, but the market value came down. Those numbers are self-reported from the USDA, so I don't know exactly how to compare, how fit-digging is these numbers. Pretty good numbers. That's the benchmark for the industry. But it's interesting seeing this decrease here in 13.5%. And I don't know where that comes from. If the value of those crops are coming down, what's happening? So if anyone has any insights here, feel free to share if you have anything in your mind.
Erico, this is Neil at Cornell. I don't know that I have any insights, but I find that pattern strange with fruits and berries, because anecdotally, I would have thought, at least under protection in like high tunnels, there's a little bit more going on in like raspberry and blackberry production. So it's, yeah, strange. Maybe a few big players didn't report their numbers to the USDA or something, and that's showing up as lower production value than 5 years ago.
This is Ed Harwood. I think there's a possibility that it's a function of price. Is that possible?
It could be, Ed, because they don't sell. They just give the value of sales, the total number. They don't say how the price fluctuates. They do not include that. So it could be one alternative.
Right.
Yeah.
Competition is increased, so. But I know nothing about berries. And
I don't remember the prices from 2012 on my strawberries. I buy strawberries all the time. It's one of my favorite fruits. And I see this price increasing, not decreasing, over the past few years. I can remember 2012. But that's a good point. And I'm making a few notes as we talk here. I'll see if I can do some deep digging afterwards and try to come up with a list of points here we discussed today and see if we can have at least insights about some of those points, and this will be one of those. Right. I shared this presentation with everyone here today. Just so as you know, I'm not talking about the 2007 numbers because they are not completed. So some of them was just missing. I don't know what happened. They did not record at the time, but you have them here as well if you want to look at a more long-term market pattern. So you can see number of farms, how they go, square footage, and on this case, there's no value of sales. But you have some of this data as well if you want to take a better analysis later on your own. So let's take a look on the same information now, but just graphically, a little bit more visually appealing. So the value of sales, this first graphic talks about the value of sales and how they go from 2012 to 2017. Tomatoes, as we saw, there was an increase of 4.7%. So that's how they go here, 400 million, 418 million. Other greenhouse vegetables with the biggest growth from 2012, 40.6%. And the berry reduction on the market value from 28.9 to 25.051 million from 2012 to 2017. One interesting insight we got from that table that we just saw, how the market share changed from 2012 to 2017. So we had a larger dominance of tomatoes in 2012 with 60% of the self-reported market, 35% other greenhouse vegetables and fresh herbs, and 4% fruit and berries. As we move to 2017, the only one that grow here are the other greenhouse vegetables, while the other two categories, there was a market reduction, even on the market share, according to the self-report numbers to the USDA. So that confirms, I think, these numbers that we see up here. We're going to look into a little bit more detail for the total greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs, and also for the tomato market. That's data that is available at the report. We can do an in-depth analysis. The other categories do not provide this data we're going to see now. So the first table up here is the same one we saw at the first slide for total greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs with the market growth, according value of sales, square footage, and farms. But this table below here, they break down the farms into size, number of farms, square footage, and value of sales in different categories. So I have different brackets here. A few things interesting to observe on this graphic. The small farms, very small farms, 1 to 900 square footage, they represent 30%, 31.6% of the number of farms in US. But they cover just 1.1% of the square footage of the total industry. And they represent a value of sales of 1%. For these small facilities, they are getting an average of $5.74 per square foot of what they're selling. And keep in mind, this is total greenhouse vegetables. It's a mix of tomatoes and other greenhouse vegetables. The other two categories, 1,000 square footage to 3,000 or 2,999, they represent the other 30% roughly, with an average sales going from 6.28 to the lowest among all the categories. Something is happening here at the 2,000, 2,999 square footage, where they're getting the least amount of money per square footage, which is $4.42. And then we can jump all the way to the largest category, or the largest farms, which is 40,000 or more square footage. They represent just 2.7% of the number of farms. However, they cover 67.6% of the square footage in greenhouses in US, with a value of sales of 67.8%. Those guys are making about $6.67 per square footage. I think this is something normal to expect. The very large farms having a small number of those, and they dominate big part of the market. That's not a surprise. What I find interesting is this category here, just the one on top, the 20,000 square footage, all the way to 39.999 square feet. They are making $11.23 per square footage. So this category here might be a good mix of technology and also manageable size greenhouse, something they're doing right, that they're getting the most amount of money per square footage. And again, here I don't have the reason why, but it's a nice observation. Same information, but now in a graphic way. We see what we just saw here. The number of farms are the blue bars. And as you get smaller farms, you have a lot of those, but they represent very small percentage of the market share, the sales being the transactions on the market. As you increase the size of the farm, the value of sales that they represent increases until you get to the 40,000 or more. There is a dramatic jump into the value of sales from those farms. Here's another graphic for visualization. So the number of farms that we have from different categories according to their size. they're represented up here. And here you can see the 30% category, 32% with the very small farms. And then you have another 30% with the second to third smaller categories from 1,000 to 3,000 square footage. And then the other 30% would be up here, or the 40% would be up here with the bigger farms. At this graphic, we can see that phenomenon or that observation where this category here, the 20,000 to 39,999 square footage, they are just 6% of the market, but they represent 10% of the value of sales. All the others, they're pretty much one-to-one. If you see the larger farmers, 68% area and 68% value of sales. And the same is true for the other categories. So you have 1 and 1, 2 and 2, 4 and 3, pretty close. Something is happening here that they're making more money than the others. As we move forward, we're going to look now for greenhouse tomatoes. It's the same breakdown, but just for tomatoes now. One interesting thing to keep in mind, or just to observe, is that for the tomatoes, the variance here on the maximum and minimum amount of value sales is pretty closer, because now you don't have two categories. It's not other vegetables, it's only tomatoes. So they vary from $4.63 per square footage to $7.28. We can see here by observation that the low end we saw under the total greenhouse industry would come probably from the tomatoes, was pretty close to that number. But then the highest number, which was about $11.5 per square footage, must be coming from the other vegetables and fresh cut herbs. So we can narrow down the value of sales for tomatoes. Under this category, we see something similar. Numbers are a little bit different, but it's the same trend. With the smaller farms, they represent 41.8% of the number of farms in the US, covering 1.8% of the square footage of tomato greenhouses, and representing 1.7% on the value of sales, while with the very large farms, the 40,000 acres or more, they are now representing just 1.4%, but the square footage is much larger, 67% of the total market, and the value of sales is even larger, 74.5% of the value of sales coming from the large greenhouses. The breakdown to the 30% would be similar. You have the next two categories here, 1,000 to 3,000 square footage, covering another large area. So here would be a little bit more than 30%, but pretty similar trend as the total greenhouse vegetables and tomatoes. Same graphics, number of farms decreasing as the size of farms increase, and then the value of sales increasing. You have a little bit increase all the way up to 40,000 square footage or more, but then you have this big spike here with the large farms. Same graphic representation, and we can see by the colors that on this case, although you have 42%, it's more with the very small farms. They also get a very small percentage of the sales, but we can see that the large farms, those are the ones doing better here. So although they cover 67% of the area, they make 74% of the value of sales. So those are the most efficient growers in the tomato industry, is coming from the large growers. I'll change now gears, and you're going to see an analysis state by state for the three categories. Anyone has any comments, anything to add, or any questions before we change gears?
Yeah, this is Ed again. I wonder if the lowest category there is roadside sales and farmers market, although there's not enough production there perhaps to support a booth at a farmer's market.
Yeah, and maybe it's complementing a traditional outdoor vegetable production as well, or orchard, and doing a bit of year-round production or off-season production to complement field-grown product. I think it's interesting that really only tomatoes are the crop that's tracked, other than everything else gets lumped together. And hopefully this increasing value of the other categories going to make the USDA track a few other product lines in the next census.
Yeah, and this is Kyle Clark. Just speaking to that, Tim, I was just pulling up, there's a USDA Census of Horticulture as well. I don't know if you came across it, Erico. It's a little bit more buried and not that many people know about it, but I was just going through that, and it does look like they break out things a little bit more granularly. So they have food crops grown under protection, and they have like peppers and lettuce and cucumbers, strawberries, tomatoes broken out. I just kind of the only unfortunate thing is the years are a little bit different. So they have like one from 2014, one from 2009. 2014 is the most recent. But that would be something to take a look at, and you might be able to glean some more information from that. There's also a breakout for hydroponic systems.
I have not heard about this one, Kyle. Thanks for letting us know. And yeah, that'll be very interesting. We can take a look, and even though the years do not match, it might give some insights and indications about these general numbers we're seeing today. And maybe we can have a discussion about that if there's enough interest from all the members. Thanks for sharing that. If you don't mind, can you send me the link or the PDF, and then I can share with everyone else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something I only come across last year, and yeah, it's kind of buried. I spent a lot of time in the census data, so I was surprised to find it. But yeah, I'll send you a couple links to that.
Perfect. Thank you.
Also, the people who work at NASS, if that's still the direct organization or whatever, sometimes they have specialists who can give you a lot of insight into it more than what's published.
Yeah, absolutely. The trick is just getting the right person on the phone.
Yes. Right.
That could be also, thanks for sharing that, Ed. That could be a guest speaker for the next industry talk if there's enough interest. If we can find the right person on the phone, like Kyle mentioned. But yeah, 2 notes made here. Thank you. Wonderful. All right. Let's take a look at some of the data now, what is available at the Census of Ag. I tried to do some analysis looking on state by state for the categories that were available. So the first one, total greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs. So keep in mind again that here it combines the numbers from tomatoes and the other greenhouse vegetables. But if you add those 2 numbers, they do not necessarily add to 100%, because some people might report 2 times, or they might not report in some of the categories. But here is the total when they do the survey, getting the total number of greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs. So the top 7 states, and by the way, I do have this list for the top 10. I just did not include because it would be too much numbers and cumbersome to take a look here, but I can share this with everyone after the meeting. So looking for the top 7 states regarding market value. Clearly to see that California dwarfs anyone else. So they have 46% of the production is coming from California. And there was a market growth in California of 26% from 2012 to 2017. Interesting to see. That's one of the cases that represents something interesting, even though the market value really grew a lot and the square footage also grew. The number of farms decreased. So that's, we think, is an indication of large company merging with each other or acquiring one greenhouse, acquiring another one, the large ones, and that's when we see those type of numbers. Following California, you have Texas, Ohio, New York, Maine, Virginia, and Minnesota. What we see here, again, the market share among this, and this market share is not, so just make sure here, this market share is not for the total 50 states. We are seeing for the market share divided among the top 7 states. So if you do the top 50 or the top 10 or 15, they will change, but they will hold the same ratios pretty much. Few interesting things to see. I highlighted the ones that had a big spike into the value of sales. So that happened to Ohio. Ohio went from about $10 million value of sales in 2012 to 43 million or almost 44 million in 2017. So market growth of 317% in just 5 years. And then we also see a big spike in Virginia regarding the total greenhouse and vegetable fresh cut herbs. So 270% spike, going from about 8.5 million to 31.5 million from 2012 to 2017. Here you can see a map representing those states. Just interesting to see. The reason I add this here, you can have a quick visualization on the market growth. So that'll be the percentage and then the total value for 2017. And just to see where they are. So you see California and Texas, probably the weather is playing a big role here. But then you have here in the Northeast a high concentration as well, including Minnesota up here. Same analysis now for greenhouse tomatoes. So looking just for tomatoes, California is not as dominant as the total number of greenhouse or total greenhouse production. They have 33% of the tomato production, followed by Texas again, Ohio, New York, Minnesota, Arizona, and Illinois. Within the tomato industry, the big spikes again coming from Ohio. So Ohio had a 900% increase on the value of sales compared to 2012. They went from 3 million to 32 million, so it's a very impressive number. And if you have in your mind Ohio, the total market value sales for tomatoes and other greenhouse and other vegetables was 43 million. Here is 32, so it's about 75% of the market in Ohio now. The CEA market is coming from tomatoes. The other big state with increase, a big spike, is Illinois. So they went from 1.7 million to 10.6 million from 2012 to 2017 with a market growth of 517%. We did talk a little bit about that among ourselves at GLASE on why we think Ohio had this big spike. One of the assumptions or one of the insights could be large greenhouses coming from Canada moving to Ohio for a few reasons. There is a lot of now market demand in Canada for cannabis greenhouses. So some of them I think are being converted, and also the energy, access to energy. Some of them were reported having trouble with access to energy in Canada and they moved to Ohio. For the people on the call here, do you have any sites, do you have any comments, or do you see any market trends why Ohio and Illinois would have this huge spike from 2012 to 2017?
It's interesting to note the change in number of farms in square footage when you do this. So if you look at California, there's fewer farms, but a significant increase in square footage. And then if you compare that to Ohio, you've got a significant increase in the number of farms and a concurrent one, or more than that, I guess, in square footage. So it would be nice to have some way to compare those particular numbers, just to somewhat normalize the information.
Yeah, Ed, and do you think, could that be an indication that in California, it could be a matter of merging greenhouses and maybe increasing productivity, but pretty much established bases versus Ohio and Illinois, considering that there is a large increase in the number of farms and square footage, could be new greenhouses coming to this market. It's a whole brand new market. Do you think that could be one reason?
Yeah, I definitely think it could be one of the reasons considered.
And I think if I look at it in California, there was a larger growth in greenhouse area as compared to the actual increase in production value. So maybe those California structures are lower tech structures versus in Ohio, there was a 458% increase in area, but more than 900% increase in sales. So then those new structures going into Ohio might be those higher tech greenhouses with heating and supplemental lighting during the off season.
Yeah, that's
Eric, do you know anything about the data collection methods and things like the response rate? I mean, how reliable do you think it is in Ohio, for example, a 10x in their total sales? Somebody mentioned certain people not reporting could swing the numbers in a big way.
John, that's a good point. The 2017 Census of Ag They do have a section where they describe how they do the data collection and the methodology, which I have not looked into detail. That's something I could take a quick look and make a summary, at least indicate where they're describing this, and follow up with everyone here. But you're right, there could be, if people are not reporting correctly, if they're not reporting at all, that could change the data. Let me do some more analysis, and like was mentioned here before, if I can get someone on the phone from NASS to ask some of these questions, that could be a good follow-up for me to do before getting back to everyone here. But you're right, that could happen.
I do think in the case of Ohio, it's not that they didn't report in 2012. It's just that there's a couple large production facilities now in Ohio that weren't there in 2012. There's Sunset. There's at least a 20-acre facility, if not larger now, in a second phase. And then another, I was looking up their name, Golden Fresh Farms is another project in Ohio that's 20 acres that would have opened up in the last years.
And to follow up on that, as far as I know, this Census of Ag is the most accurate data that you can find. There's the most detailed and accurate data that you can find. I just became aware now of the Census of Horticulture. We should take a look as well. But I think that's the best market information we can find today.
It would be helpful to have someone, an ag economist, or to convert this into suggested knowledge. So one example of the knowledge that could be shared that uses this as a basis is for investors. What are they investing in? They always want to know what the market size is and that and other sort of contextual information.
Yes, Ed. We did invite Marvin Miller from Ball to participate. He could not join today, so he was willing to join and be part of the conversation, but he had some training folks at his company. He could not join today. I will follow up with him. I asked him to take a look at this data afterwards, and he did. He made himself available to that. So I'll include some of those questions that we have today. I'll run by him and see how much of his time we can use on his goodwill. So hopefully we can come back with something a little bit more insightful than the basic numbers we're looking today.
Thanks.
Wonderful. So let me change gears. Let's go to the next one. This is the graphic representation where they are. So for the tomato industry, we get more into the southeast and the east coast. So California, the West Coast, California, Arizona, Texas, and then we have the Northeast again with Minnesota. And the other category, which is the other greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs. Here we have a large majority coming from California, 60% of the market, followed by Virginia, Illinois, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and New York. Same type of analysis here. We look at the market growth, number of farms, square footage, and then the market value. On this case, Virginia comes as one of the highlights with 245% value of sales increase from 2012 to 2017. But bigger than that is Illinois again. So Illinois has been a very fast market growth for CEA from 2012 to 2017. On this case, 564% market growth, going from $2.1 million to almost $14.3 million in 2017. Same type of analysis, so you can see places are the number of farms changed versus the square footage, and then the market growth, the value growth. Again, Illinois, there is a lot of new area, 76% new area cover. The same thing for Virginia, for the two states that are growing a lot. One interesting case would be Massachusetts. You also have a large increase in market sale, 63% is a good number, but you have less farms and more square footage, considerably more square footage. But the same type of analysis. So as you go from these graphics later on, if that's helpful, you can take this information and visualize what's happening with this industry. Moving forward on the graphic, the map analysis, that's interesting. We don't have the South states anymore. We do have the West Coast with California, but then a big concentration here in the Northeast for the other greenhouse vegetables and fresh cut herbs. The last category that we have, we're not going to see any of those graphics, but I would like to include here is floriculture and bedding crops and propagative materials. There are other categories included into the 2017 Census of Ag, but they're not really for the greenhouse industry, so I did not include here. But just for your information, within the floriculture and bedding crops, they're broken down into these 5 categories. You have bedding and garden plants, cut flowers and cut flower screens, foliage plants indoors, potted flowering plants, and other floriculture and bedding crops. And then they have more detailed descriptions at the Census of Ag. And within propagative materials, we'll be looking for cuttings, seedlings, liners, and plugs. Basic numbers from the census. So the first thing to take a look at this table here is that for both floriculture and bedding crops, as well as propagative materials, they would be reporting the data and the numbers in 2 categories, under GLASE and other protection, where they give us the numbers in square footage, but also in the open, where they give us the numbers in acres. Then when they do report the value of sales, it's a combined value of sales. For this reason, I have not made an analysis because we cannot separate them where comes from where here. So between the under GLASE and other protection and in the open. We can use these as a reference numbers, but no detailed analysis. Looking just here for the under GLASE and other protection numbers, it's a pretty mixed set of situations where you have markets going up and markets going down according to the area, so not the value of sales. The total under GLASE and other protection for floriculture and bedding crops had a reported decrease of 0.4% in the area. And then you have the different categories here. Bedding plants, there was an increase of 5.4%. Cut flowers and cut flower screens, a decrease of almost 3%. Foliage plants and indoor, that took a big hit, so it was minus 25.8% into the area. And then for potted flowering plants, an increase of 5.8%, and other floriculture and bedding crops, a decrease of 6.4%. As you look for the market growth, the one that I just would like to highlight, again, even though it combines in the open and under GLASE and other protection facilities, there was a market growth, or there was a market decrease in this case, minus 25.5% for foliage plants and indoors. And pretty much it has a good relation with the growth of the under protection, but not necessarily means it comes from here. There's also a big decrease into the growth of in the open category as well for foliage plants and indoors. Then the last category, propagative materials. In terms of area, there was a growth of 4.2% for cuttings, seedlings, liners, and plugs from 2012 to 2017 for crops grown under GLASE and other protection. There was a decrease in area for the same crops now grown in the open, and the market growth will achieve 9.2% from 2012 to 2017. So like I said, no more detailed analysis into this category. And with that, we finish the numbers we had for the 2017 Census of Ag data analysis. That was the information that I had to present. And we have about 20 minutes for discussion, questions, and any insights you have about those numbers. Anyone has any questions specifically?
I know in the greenhouse floriculture industry, they're very much viewing this growth as pretty much flat. So only a 4.9% increase in the last 5 years. About a 1% increase per year is maybe not even barely keeping up with inflation. So the vegetable sector is at least doing, quite a bit better than the greenhouse floriculture sector in that regard. It's still a smaller industry. Do you have the total production value? Something like, okay, so 750,000 with 18% growth over the last 5 years versus floriculture. Was that more like $4 billion with a 4.9% increase over the last 5 years?
Let me get out of this screen, otherwise you guys are gonna get dizzy.
There you go. There you go.
Yes.
Okay, above 6 billion. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned, so if they're considering this a flat growth,
Mm-hmm.
that will be similar to the tomato industry, right? So the tomato industry was 4.7 market growth. And I don't know how would that be seen by the tomato growers.
Yeah, it's interesting. So production, square footage is going up with tomatoes. We talked about like the 2 new operations in Ohio. In New York, our large operator, Intergrow, expanded during the last 5 years from maybe 50 acres to like 70 acres undercover. So I also wonder if we're seeing some downward price pressure on tomatoes too. So maybe the price per pound is going down, because it seems like we should be producing more tomatoes with the new area that was added since 2012.
Yeah, it seems that this is a good number to add to this discussion, the price per pound for all those crops. I think that will bring a lot of insights on how the area is fluctuating in the number of farms and just total value of sales for all these categories. And I find interesting as well what Kyle mentioned before, the fact that they do not report the other vine crops or other crops, something like cucumbers, peppers, which has a large market share, and they do not look into that. They just consider tomato and all the rest. So hopefully the Census of Horticulture would give us insights about how to break down this market.
I think there's some other exogenous factors that could be looked at, and that would be government programs. So when did high tunnels get sufficient support where you could almost put them up for nothing? And then people who change crops. I believe New York lost some 500 dairy farmers. What did they do? They have assets that they could potentially shift to a different crop. And then expertise. If family members have learned enough about agriculture, because I think that's a fairly steep learning curve in terms of understanding how to grow plants, then that could also help with expansion.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think with you have a good point with the high tunnels ad, that the NRCS, had really good incentive programs for constructing high tunnels. So I think some of just the overall numbers increase that we saw just in the number of farms at these very small sizes were probably people putting up simple high tunnels to supplement field agriculture or more traditional agriculture.
Yep.
What do you think, Neil, and everyone on the call? Neil, Ed, those farms here, for example, farms that go from 1 to 999 square footage, they cannot be a glass greenhouse, right? They probably are high tunnels. What do you think?
I would agree. My brother is an example. He put up a high tunnel under the NRCS program, grows enough tomatoes to make a sauce and sells it at the farmer's market. And so he'd be one of the ones to fit in that statistic.
Yeah, and that's a large category, right? There's a lot of farms here, and I don't know how they would be skewing the data up and down. So yeah, maybe that's something we can try to find. If I can find someone at USDA who could tell us where would be the cutting point here, where you for sure are high tunnels versus greenhouses, where the greenhouses start here versus a mix of high tunnels and greenhouses, so we could have some better insights.
Yeah, and there's probably no clear-cut answer. The high tunnels do tend to be smaller. Maybe about 3,000 square feet is the largest single span high tunnel that I'll see. So maybe 30 feet wide by 100 foot long. But then there are occasionally gutter connected high tunnels too. And those could have bigger square footage.
Do you think there would be greenhouses under this threshold here? because just these two categories, if you take normally the three first categories, they would represent 60% of the market in all the categories that we saw here. That could be an assumption that they are high tunnels.
But they could also be small heated greenhouses too, for like direct sales to restaurants or farmers markets.
Okay.
Rico, I had a question in regards to hemp. Do you know if for the next egg census, will hemp be included as far as greenhouse production, since it's increasing at such a high rate?
That's a good question, Dave. I am not sure about that. I believe they would. Now that is on the Farm Bill, I believe they, well, I hope they do that. Let me put that away. I hope they do, but I have no idea. I don't know. I never talked to anyone of that department. I don't know how they make these decisions. That's something I can take a look and dig some more information if I can find the right person. At least see what they're thinking about this and how they plan to move forward. But that will be great source of information for sure. Like what you mentioned, the industry is growing so fast. I think a lot of people would be interested in that, including investors, like Ed mentioned before.
Erico, I know at a different time we had discussed the production value of cannabis, which is not something we can study in GLASE per se, but that it surprised me in how large that sector was as compared to greenhouse vegetable production.
Yes, I don't have the number here with me, Neil, but it was really big. I have to find, maybe I can, that's something I can find exact. I don't want to bring a number on top of my head and it's wrong, but I can look at the latest. There are so many market reports for cannabis nowadays out there. I'll definitely include some of that. And also, there are nice projections for hemp as well at this time, the hemp industry. So I'll include some numbers or indications and literature about that on my follow-up email. But I don't think USDA will be publishing anything on cannabis, even on the next Census of Ag, which should be, if they follow this trend here in about 5 years, the last one 2012, 2023 or so. But it'll be great to see this number as well.
Yeah, it'll be, this is Kyle, it'll be interesting in the next Census of Ag because, I assume they will include hemp, given that it's approved in the Farm Bill, but then like in California, you've got a lot of large greenhouses and greenhouse area being converted to medical cannabis as well. So those ones are just going to disappear off the census. But then of course, ones that are growing hemp will be showing up. So there'll be some funny things going on with the data set for greenhouses in the next census, I'm sure.
Erico, first of all, just want to thank you and Neil and the other members of GLASE who are helping with this. I think this is a very good topic for sure. It does make me wonder how we might influence either the diversification of the information or some of these other exogenous factors and getting those from NASS. How do we influence NASS to do those kind of things to be more helpful to our industry?
Great point, Ed, and thanks for bringing that up. We are planning, and that's something I'd like to get, if everyone here agrees on this talk today. We did present these numbers, but we're getting inputs and feedback from everyone here. So I would like to check with all of you if it would be okay if we go ahead and make a publication out of those talks. So what I would do, working with Dave Kwok, which has been writing articles for GLASE, we can write a short article about this discussion today, put out there to create awareness. So that will be step number one. Just show they're using their data in a useful way for the CEA industry. Discussions like these, I think that will be step number one. But your point, Ed, I haven't thought about this, how to directly influence them. Maybe we can make a follow-up. I can follow up with all of you by email. And if we have something that is signed by growers, so all the GLASE members, and we could open, if we make this public, we can open and get more growers to participate. saying that we made these discussions and growers are looking for these specific types of information, how to add value or how to determine the more thorough analysis. I could then, on behalf of GLASE and its industry members and everyone who participate, try to locate the right person at NAS and provide them this feedback and just advocate for these changes or improvements that we are talking now for the next Census of Ag, or even better, we don't have to wait until then, if they could do something between now and the next one, which would take a long time to be published. Do you think that that would work? Do you have any other recommendations?
Yes, it may be that you have to go higher up than that. So, you know, it could be to the Secretary of Agriculture or the appropriate undersecretary or something like that. But I enthusiastically endorse what you're suggesting. That's
wonderful. And I think we do have access to major growers around the US, including everyone on this call here. So I think the support from all of you would be pretty good. So counting on your endorsement is really helpful. Thank you for that.
I do think it would be helpful to have an ag economist review it so that the language fits all of that, so that the reader feels comfortable with what's being said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll just mention one thing that I've come across and had a kind of a wish list on with the census data. They do have NAS and others have some data visualization tools on their websites, but they're kind of lacking granularity and in some cases missing entire commodities. Like I'm looking at the NAS data visualization right now and I could be missing it, but I'm not seeing anything relating to production under GLASE, but they have the platform and the foundation there, and that could make it very easy to compare, you know, to do some of the analysis that you did, but in an instantaneous and more visual sense, where it's showing kind of a heat map of the US. So, you know, if we could put together some specific requests there for how to integrate CEA into this data visualization tools, I think that could be very helpful for investors and others in the industry.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a great way to attract people to GLASE as well, getting feedback and providing value for the industry. That certainly sounds a very useful task to do and would be a good way to provide the industry with benefits. I do agree with that. Wonderful. Well, we are getting close to 4 o'clock and I will be respectful of your time. We scheduled this talk from 3 to 4. I would like to thank everyone for participating, join the call. I hope you find that useful. I definitely enjoy this chat with all of you. I would like to thank all the GLASE team for helping preparing for this presentation as well. I did got lots of good feedback and ideas. I will compile an email and a one-page summary of what we're doing now and get back to you. So Kyle, you mentioned a few specific interesting resources. If you could share that with me, the horticultural census, the link that you just mentioned for the NAS webpage. If you don't mind, I would share with everyone else, make this available to everyone here. Ed, I will follow up on some of your points, see how can we make this a final document or official document to follow up with the USDA. I can check with a few economists. Cornell has a very strong team of ag economists. I can check there. We can check with other folks as well. And the last comment I would like to make, again, if you have any issues or if you think there is any problems in making this a publication, please let me know. Otherwise, I'll be working with Dave Kwok, who joined the call here today, to create the newsletter article for this month for GLASE would be around this topic. So we can crunch some of this data, clean up, get a few conclusions, put out there and start this whole process of awareness and outreach and education. So if you have any comments, any trouble or any problems with that, please let me know by email or whatever you feel the best for you. Other than that, I would thank everyone. Any final comments, any closing remarks from anyone on the call? Okay, This presentation will be available at the GLASE website for members only. So this is part of your password protected section, which, by the way, I have 3 minutes here. If you have any trouble accessing this, that's relatively new. I think we launched the password and login about a month ago. I have received one follow-up question that someone was not working properly, and we fixed that. So if you had any trouble or having any issues accessing the website and getting the material there, please let me know. And if you have any other insights and feedback about navigation, how to make the website better, let me know. It is our goal to make this a hub, a repository of all this information we are discussing, to make your life easier and a big database for you to access useful information. So at any time, if you have any questions or suggestions, please let me know as well. All right, with that said, I wish everyone have a good end of the afternoon, a good Tuesday. Have a good week, and I'll see you again on our next industry talk. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Have a good day.
Thank you, Erico.
Thanks, Erico.
Sounds great. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thanks.